Okay, state and federal powers in American federalism.
And welcome back. This is one of a series of videos looking at key issues and concepts in American politics. In this video, we're going to explore how power is divided between the states
Two
and the
years
national
ago.
government under the American system of federalism. In another video, we examine the division of power between the national and state governments, observing that some of the powers are expressly granted to the federal government, some are shared between the state government and the federal government, and some are reserved exclusively to the states.
Okay, we did not watch this video. Let's see. National powers. Regulate foreign and interstate commerce. Coin money, declare war, foreign affairs. State powers. Regulate intrastate commerce. Establish local governments. Administer elections. Police powers. Congruent powers, so things that are kind of overlapped by both. Levy taxes, borrow money, establish courts, enact and enforce law.
In this video, we'll consider the constitutional provisions that establish this division in more detail. Article 1, Section 8 of the U.S. Constitution outlines the broad powers explicitly granted to the federal government. Because of this, it's sometimes referred to as the enumerated powers or the expressed powers clause. These powers include the ability to levy taxes, regulate commerce, coin money, establish post offices, declare war, and maintain a military. The enumerated powers were designed to provide the central government with sufficient authority to address national issues while maintaining a balance of power with the states. The same article also includes the provision that grants Congress the express power to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers and all other powers vested by this Constitution in the government of the United States or in any department or officer thereof. This is often referred to as the Elastic Clause or the Implied Powers Clause because it grants the government powers not specifically enumerated but necessary to govern. Arguably, the most significant source of federal power today is the Commerce Clause. Found in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3 of the U.S. Constitution, the Commerce Clause grants the Congress the power to regulate commerce with foreign nations and among the several states and with Indian tribes. The Commerce Clause is one of the most important and far reaching powers granted to Congress in the Constitution.
To negotiate commerce with foreign nations and among several states and with the Indian tribe. Let me hear that one again.
Found in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3 of the U.S. Constitution, the Commerce Clause grants the Congress the power to
So Congress is the Senate and the House of Representatives. So the elected body.
regulate commerce with foreign nations and among the several states and with Indian tribes.
So Trump is a member of the executive branch. So his tariffs become law because of the Commerce Clause would have to be passed uh, by the Senate and the House of Representatives, right? That happened? Or is this why all those tariffs were struck down and then he found another way of doing it because he needed the the Senate and the House of Representatives to vote on it if he wanted to use this method to do tariffs, because that I would say negotiate commerce with foreign nations, but tariffs are like internal. No, I guess this is why there's entire departments that interpret this stuff. Because a tariff is putting a price on something that you're importing. I don't know. You can read that multiple ways. Let's just hear it one more time.
Federal power today is the Commerce Clause. Found in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3 of the U.S. Constitution, the Commerce Clause grants the Congress the power to regulate commerce with foreign nations and among the several states and with Indian tribes. The Commerce Clause is one of the most important and far-reaching powers granted to Congress in the Constitution, as it gives Congress the power to regulate a wide range of economic activity, including the production, distribution, and sale of goods and services. This clause has been used to support a broad range of federal regulations, from labor laws to environmental regulations to consumer protection.
Maybe I can ask ChatGPT that. Commerce Clause. Allow. How does the Commerce Clause in the U.S. Constitution, how does that affect President Trump's tariffs? The Commerce Clause, found in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3, gives Congress the power to regulate commerce with foreign nations and among several states. This clause plays a big role in understanding why President Trump could impose tariffs, even though the Constitution gives that power to Congress, not the President. Right? Below is how the Commerce Clause interacts with presidential tariff actions, including those taken by Donald Trump. The Commerce Clause gives Congress the power over foreign commerce. Tariffs are, by nature, a form of regulation of foreign commerce. So constitutionally, the power belongs to Congress, not the president. But Congress exercises that power by passing trade laws and tariff statutes. But Congress has also passed laws delegating some of that power to the president. Okay, here we go. Congress delegated tariff powers to the president. This is the key. Congress passed multiple laws giving the presidential authority to impose tariffs under certain conditions. Important delegation statutes used during Trump's presidency. Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act of 1962 allows the president to impose tariffs for national security reasons. Is this why when I've watched the news, he's always talking about like security threats? Because that was an important part of allowing him to pass his tariffs. Section 301 of the Trade Act of 1974 allows tariffs in response to unfair foreign trade practices. I think I've heard that said a lot, such as intellectual property violations. Trump relies heavily on both. Because these powers were delegated by Congress, courts have held that the president's tariff actions are constitutional, even if controversial. So how does the Commerce Clause affect Trump's tariffs? Congress has the constitutional power. Congress delegated parts of that power to the president. Courts said the delegation is broad but allowed. Weren't some of them struck down? Congress controls trade, but Congress... Okay, the Commerce Clause means Congress controls trade, but Congress choose to give the president large discretion. Trump used these delegated powers to impose tariffs without needing congressional approval. I've heard about certain tariffs that were struck down. How does this play into the situation? Some of President Trump's tariffs were upheld, but a few specific ones were struck down or partially invalidated. Because I remember hearing on the news that like there was some some people were saying that there might be like a big payback of tariffs that were not upheld. Well, I don't know what's happening with that right now. When courts strike down a tariff, it usually means the president exceeded the authority Congress delegated, or the administration failed to follow required procedures. Okay, when courts strike down tariffs, it's not because of the Commerce Clause directly. The Commerce Clause gives Congress powers over foreign commerce, not the president. So when courts review presidential tariff action, they do not ask, does the Commerce Clause stop the president from doing this? Instead, they ask, did Congress delegate this power, and did the president stay within what Congress allowed? So strike downs happen under statutory law, not the Constitution. Okay, here we go. Why some Trump tariffs were struck down. The key reason? The president went beyond what Congress actually authorized in the trade statutes. Here are the notable examples. Okay, I don't want to get too into the sections and actual what this means in relation to the Commerce Clause. I don't really care about that. Okay. Great. Get back to it.
Over time, the interpretation of the Commerce Clause has expanded to cover not just interstate commerce, but also activities that have substantial effects on interstate commerce, even if they do not involve crossing state lines. This has led to some controversy and criticism, as some argue that the Commerce Clause has been used to expand the powers of the federal government beyond what the founders originally intended, a debate we examine in more detail in another video. Article 4, Clause 2 of the Constitution provides that this Constitution and the laws of the United States which shall be made in pursuance thereof, and all treaties made or which shall be made under the authority of the United States, shall be the supreme law of the land, and the judges in every state shall be bound thereby. This is often referred to as the Supremacy Clause. It's intended to ensure that federal law takes precedence over conflicting state laws, emphasizing the authority of the federal government.
Okay. Let me hear that one again.
Clause 2 of the Constitution provides that this Constitution and the laws of the United States which shall be made in pursuance thereof, and all treaties made or which shall be made under the authority of the United States, shall be the supreme law of the land, and the judges in every state shall be bound thereby. This is often referred to as the Supremacy Clause. It's intended to ensure that federal law takes precedence over conflicting state laws.
So, the federal law, what is passed the federal level, it takes precedent over state law. I mean, that makes sense. What happens when you get contradictions? And then you have to go by the federal law. Okay. So I think we've been seeing some of this play out in the US recently. But the federal law reigns supreme.
Emphasizing the authority of the federal government. The 10th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution attempts to balance the power of the federal government against those of the states. It provides that the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. This is often referred to as the Reserved Powers Clause because it provides that the national government only has those powers explicitly granted to it by the Constitution, and that any powers not granted to the federal government are the purview of the states. This means that states have significant power to govern themselves and to make their own laws as long as those laws do not conflict with the Constitution or with federal law. The 10th Amendment ensures the federal government does.
Oh, I'm trying to keep this one up here. Watching this. When has the state laws and federal law come in opposition recently? Laws. Usually, here are recent high-profile situations where state laws and federal laws directly clashed, leading to lawsuits, injunctions, and Supreme Court attention. Immigration enforcement. Texas versus the federal government. Texas passed SB 4, allowing state police to arrest migrants for illegal entry, ordered them to leave the U.S. Conflict. Immigration enforcement is traditionally federal, not state. The federal government sued Texas, arguing the state law interferes with federal immigration powers. Status. Federal courts have issued multiple injunctions. The issue is still being litigated. Why this matters? It tests whether a state can run its own immigration system, something normally preempted by federal authority. Okay, I remember hearing about that one. And so it's actually the federal government suing the state government because they're using police to affect their immigration laws, allowing state police to arrest migrants for illegal entry. And so this is something that's probably going to go to the Supreme Court at some point, right? And they'll make a ruling that'll determine whether states can set up, whether state police can arrest migrants for illegal entry. Okay. Abortion restrictions after Dobbs. States versus federal protections for medical emergencies. After Dobbs versus Jackson, many states created strict abortion bans. The federal law, EMTALA, requires hospitals to provide emergency stabilizing treatment, including abortion when necessary to save the mother's life. Conflict. Some states argue that EMTALA does not override their abortion bans. The federal government argued it must apply even in banned states. A major case involved Idaho, where federal courts ruled parties in favor of the Biden administration in emergencies, while the Supreme Court temporarily allowed Idaho to enforce parts of its ban while litigation continues. So this is the abortion debate in the U.S. Federal law requires hospitals to provide emergency stabilizing treatment, including abortions, when necessary to save the mother's life. State laws are trying to be passed where there's no abortions. And so that's where the conflict comes in. Oh, marijuana laws. State legalizing versus federal prohibition. Many states, including California, have legalized recreational marijuana. Conflict. Federal law still classifies marijuana as illegal nationwide. Practical result, the federal government has mostly chosen not to enforce federal law against state legal businesses, but the conflict still exists legally, affecting banking, taxes, and interstate commerce. Yeah, I heard that in the US, in some places, a dispensary for marijuana still has to use like cash to pay taxes because they can't use the banking system because it's against federal law. So that's something that still hasn't been ironed out. Okay, gun regulations, state restrictions versus federal constitutional protections. Several states passed strict gun regulations that federal courts have struck down after Supreme Court 2022 Bruin decision. Okay, conflict. Federal courts have ruled that some state laws violate the Second Amendment, which functions as a federal constitutional limit on states' authority. I think that these conflicts have been going on for a long time. Okay, what else? How many examples do we got here? Environmental and climate rules, states resisting federal energy policies. Some states challenged federal climate rules issued by the EPA. Notable states versus EPA over power plant emissions regulations. The conflict, states claim federal agencies overreach. The federal government argues the rules fall under national environmental statutes. Okay, state social media laws versus federal protection. States like Florida and Texas passed laws restricting how social media companies can moderate content. Conflict. Courts have found portions of these laws clash with federal protections for online platforms, the First Amendment. These cases are now before the U.S. Supreme Court, making this one of the most important modern federal state conflicts. Can you give a short description of each of the amendments in the U.S. Constitution? That's where they're from, right? Oh, okay. This isn't too much. Here we go. Bill of Rights, 1 to 10. Freedom of religion, speech, press, assembly, and petition. Number 2, right to keep and bear arms. 3, no quartering of soldiers in private homes. Okay. That one seems like it's out of nowhere. Number 4, protection against unreasonable search and seizures. Number 5, rights in criminal cases. Things like due process, no double jeopardy, no self incrimination, compensation for taken property. Number 6, fair trial rights. Things like speedy trial, speedy ish, impartial jury, attorney, confrontation of witnesses. Okay. Number 7, right to jury trial in civil cases. Number 8, no excessive bail or fines, no cruel and unusual punishment. Number 9, rights not listed are still retained by the people. Number 10, powers not given to the federal government are reserved to the states or the people. Okay, so there's 27 total. Bill of Rights, and these are amendments, so things that are added later on. 11 limits lawsuits against states. 12 revises presidential / vice presidential election procedures. 13 abolishes slavery and involuntary servitude. 14 defines citizenship, guarantees equal protections and due process, applies rights to the states. 15 prohibits denial of voting rights based on race. 16 allows federal income tax. 17 direct elections of U.S. senators. 18 prohibition of alcohol, later repealed. 19 women's suffrage, women gained the right to vote. So they prohibited denial of voting rights based on race before women gained the right to vote. Okay. Changes start dates of presidential and congressional terms. 21 repeals prohibition, repeals the 18th Amendment. 22 limits the president to 2 terms. So that was an original part of it. That's something that's been amended in later. 23 grants Washington, D.C. electoral votes for president. 24 bans poll taxes in federal election. Is that a thing? Like, you had to pay a tax to vote? I mean, that's an interesting concept. And at 24, okay. 25, presidential succession and procedures for when the president is incapacitated. 26, lowers the voting age to 18. What was it before? 27, changes to congressional salaries take effect only after the next election. Okay. Seems interesting. Let's keep going.
Does not become too powerful, and that the states have a degree of autonomy to address the needs of their citizens. The 10th Amendment has been used by many courts to limit the power of the federal government and to protect the rights of states. It's also been used to protect individual rights and limit the power both of the federal and state governments. The Full Faith and Credit Clause is a provision of the U.S. Constitution that requires each state to honor the laws, public records, and court decisions of the other states. It's found in Article 4, Section 1 of the Constitution, and states that full faith and credit shall be given in each state to the public acts, records, and judicial proceedings of every other state. The purpose of the Full Faith and Credit Clause is to promote unity and smooth transactions between the states by ensuring that legal judgments and documents issued in one state are recognized and enforced in all other states. This means that if a legal judgment is made in one state, it will be recognized and enforced in another state, even if the laws of that state differ. The Full Faith and Credit Clause has been applied in many different contexts, such as marriage and divorce laws, child custody disputes, and property rights. For example, if a couple is married in one state, that marriage is recognized as valid in all other states, even if the laws regarding marriage are different. Similarly, if a person is granted a driver's license in one state, that license is recognized as valid in all other states. The Full Faith and Credit Clause has been the subject of some controversy and interpretation over the years, particularly in cases where there are conflicts between laws of different states. We explore some of these issues in another video. Article 6, Section 2 of the Constitution is the counterpart to the Full Faith and Credit Clause. It provides that the citizens of each state shall be entitled to all privileges and immunities of citizens in the several states. This prevents states from discriminating against citizens of other states by denying them certain fundamental rights and privileges. It provides for the free movement of people and goods across state lines by ensuring that the citizens of one state are not treated unfairly or differently from the citizens of another state. This clause applies to a wide range of fundamental rights and privileges, such as the right to travel, the right to engage in commerce, the right to enter into contracts, and the right to receive equal protection under the law. While the Privileges and Immunities Clause is an important protection for the rights of citizens, it's not an absolute guarantee of equal treatment. The Supreme Court has recognized that states may sometimes have legitimate reasons for treating non-residents differently, such as when it comes to the regulation of natural resources or the provision of public benefits. As with the issues arising from the Full Faith and Credit Clause, we'll explore some of the issues arising from the Privileges and Immunity Clause in another video. And although not part of the original Constitution and the Bill of Rights, the 11th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution is also important to understand American federalism. Ratified in 1795, the 11th Amendment provides that the judicial power of the United States shall not be construed to extend to any suit in law or equity commenced or persecuted against one of the United States by the citizens of another state or by the citizens or subjects of any foreign state. This is more commonly referred to as the doctrine of sovereign immunity. The 11th Amendment has been interpreted by the Supreme Court to mean that states cannot be sued by individuals in federal court without their consent, except in certain limited circumstances. This means that individuals cannot generally sue states for damages or legal remedies in a federal court. The concept of sovereign immunity is based on the idea that the government needs to be protected from the burden of excess litigation and that it should be immune to lawsuits that might interfere with the ability to perform its functions.
The 11th limits lawsuits against states.
However, sovereign immunity can also limit the ability of individuals to seek redress for grievances against the government, which has led to some criticism of the doctrine. Finally, the system of federalism outlined in the Constitution also imposes a number of limitations on the power of both the state and the national governments. For example, Congress cannot suspend the right to a writ of habeas corpus, that is, the right of a person to appear before a judge after being arrested and to challenge the legality of their detention. This right is enshrined in Article 1, Section 9 of the Constitution. Congress is also not permitted to pass bills of attainder, or laws that single out an individual or group for punishment without trial. The Constitution explicitly prohibits the federal government and the states from passing bills of attainder in Article 1, Section 9, Clause 3. Nor may Congress pass ex post facto laws, or laws that retroactively criminalize conduct that was legal when it occurred, or increases the punishment for conduct that was legal when it occurred. The U.S. Constitution explicitly prohibits the federal.
So you can't make a law that makes something illegal, then go back and punish people for that. That makes sense?
Government and the states from passing ex post facto laws.
It does mean your laws have got to be like keeping pace with modern, because there's a lot of like financial things that eventually become illegal, but you can't go back and punish people who have done it in the past because of the ex post facto laws.
Laws in Article 1, Section 9, Clause 3. And finally, the Constitution also limits the power of Congress to address the question of slavery, including prohibiting the government from preventing the importation of enslaved persons for 20 years and requiring free states to return escaped slaves under the Fugitive Slave Clause, Article 4, Section 2. But that's it for now. Please leave any questions you have in the comment section.
Okay, that was the second one. Let's see. Breakdown of important points in the videos. Core idea of federalism. The Constitution creates dual sovereignty. Sovereigns. The federal government is supreme in its areas, but states retain significant independent power. This was a deliberate design to balance national unity with local control. Enumerated delegated powers. These are powers explicitly given to the federal government, such as regulating interstate commerce, coining money, declaring war, and maintaining a military. Elastic clause allows Congress to pass laws needed to carry out the enumerated powers. It has been used to expand federal authority over time. It's just going through all the things we just learned. What I wanted to know, what authorities are handled by the federal government, the state government, and the local government in the US? It'll understand. Where are we here? Supremacy clause. Federal law is the supreme law of the land. If there's a conflict, federal law wins. 10th Amendment, all powers not given to the federal government nor prohibited to the states are reserved to the states or the people. This is the foundation for states' powers like education, law enforcement, intrastate commerce, marriage/family law, and most criminal law. Okay, concurrent powers, powers shared by both levels, taxation, borrowing money, building roads, establishing courts. Okay. Let's see how the powers break down. Musically breakdown of the federal, state, and local governments handled in the United States based on the Constitution and modern practices. The federal government, major federal powers, national defense and the military, foreign policy and treaties, immigration and citizenship, intrastate and international commerce, commerce and printing money, federal taxation and spending, Social Security, Medicaid, and other national programs, environmental regulation, national standards, civil rights protections, federal law enforcement, the FBI, DEA, postal system. Okay, what does the state government handle? Their powers, the education system, schools, curriculum standards. So this has already been. Wasn't there a thing where Trump got rid of the federal education system? Gave it back to the states? Was this something that's recently moved, or is this more broadly always here? Other things that the state government does is state law enforcement and state courts, public health and safety, public hospitals, health rules, marriage, divorce, and family law, property law and contracts, state roads and transportation, professional licensing, teachers, doctors, lawyers, elections and voting procedures, alcohol regulations, most criminal law, state taxes. Okay, let's look at the local governments. Country, city, towns, special districts. Their major local powers are police, fire department, emergency services, local school and school districts, zoning and land use, local roads, streets and public transit, water, sewage, garbage collection, public parks and recreation. Local ordinances, noise rules, curfews, pet laws, local business permits, property taxes. Okay, and there's a lot of shared or overlapping powers, such as law enforcement, healthcare, transportation, environment, disaster response, workplace regulation. Okay, well, we're going to learn a bit more about the local governments next.